Hello, welcome. I'm David from the Tibetan Language Institute, which we call TLI, and today I'm going to share with you how I read a little prayer in Tibetan. So this famous uh, teaching is called the Four Reliances. So I'm going to show you how I read that in Tibetan. So here we go. It's called the Four Reliances, and this enumeration translated originally from the Sanskrit, like so many of the prayers and other things we find in Tibetan language. They come from Sanskrit. It's attributed to Buddha Shakyamuni in multiple sutras, including the teaching of Akashyamati and the Sutra of Questions of the Naga King, Anavattata. Okay, so what we have here then is a title in Tibetan at the top, and then the four-line item itself. So the title, the Four Reliances, is a pretty accurate translation of it, but the way that I teach is first that we spell a line, then we read it out, then we go back and analyze it, determining what part of speech the words are, and then I offer a translation. So here to spell it, we have the title is Ratatata Naro Tonatun Ha Ba Oja Giguji. So Tun Pa Ji. So Tun Pa can be the verb to rely, or it can be the the noun reliance. So it's a little bit strange in English, but we don't talk about something being a reliance in English, but nonetheless, that's what we have here. And then G is the number four. So Tunpa G is for reliance. Tibetan does not have a the, so we just put that in to make the English work. So Tunpa G, the four reliances. That's the title. Now let's begin to look at the four lines one by one. So what we have here is the line repeated in Tibetan at the top, and then in the boxes, this is what we call a parsing table. So parse means to analyze, to identify the parts of speech, and then offer a basic translation of them. And so again, we spell a line, then we read the line out, working out loud, and then we parse it. And now we've done the parsing for you already here, but I'll walk you through it. So to spell the first line of the Four Reliances, then we've got ga, na, gong, za, ga, zak, la, ma, igu, mi, ra, ta, 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 naro, to, na, tun, cha, naro, cho, sa, ch, la, ra, ta, 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 naro, to, na, tun. I read it. Now I spelled it out. Now I'll read it out. Gong, zak, la, mi, tun, ch, la, tun. Okay, now we can look at the parsing table for the analysis of it. So these videos are designed primarily for people that are beginning readers of Tibetan, so they can spell and read a little bit. But perhaps other people that don't know how to do those things can also learn something from watching this analysis. Okay, so we've got three boxes, and we're kind of grouping the syllables according to their meaning. So the first box says gong, zak, la. Now, Tibetan is sometimes called a monosyllabic language, and that's because each syllable bears some meaning or indicates some function or relation between the other syllables. So gongzog, the first two syllables together make the word individual or person. So the gong actually can mean to be filled up, and zak can mean to fall or be depleted or something like that. So the idea I've heard said is that an individual, an isolated person, is someone who's filled with kleshas, and then they've fallen into or degenerated into the situation of samsara, dissatisfaction, right? Unhappiness. Okay, but then those two go together, gongsa, just to mean the ordinary word for a person or an individual. Okay. And then la is one of the ladan particles. And then beneath the ladan particles there, we have this abbreviation DT 20 to 26. That refers to the Divine Tree Grammar Poem, a book that's available from TLI that teaches the function of the grammatical particles. The Tibetan language is, when we analyze it grammatically, we see that it has two principal entities. There are the words, and then there are the particles. And the particles can modify the words or show how the words are connected together in a sentence, something like that. So here the law particle, it basically means on, but it can mean to, in, on, at. It cannot be translated. It can indicate a location. It can indicate an indirect object or a direct object in a sentence. So it has the force of pointing our attention back towards the left, here towards the gongsa, towards the beginning. So it could be interpreted so far as regarding the individual, and then we're going to see, we can peek ahead at the translation at the bottom. Do not rely on the individual. So in English, we rely on something, right, or someone. And so that's why we eventually chose on. But if you're just reading through it and you come upon a word and then a law, very often it's helpful to think of the law as meaning regarding or as for. So regarding the individual or as for the individual, and then in this particular context, we're referring to the person as a teacher, but that comes out of the context rather than what's literally there. And then our central box then says me turn. So magigumi is one of the four negation particles. So in English, we have negation particles such as un, im, and dis. They're like unbelievable, impossible, and then discard, right? Something like that. Okay, so magigumi is a particle that comes as two of the negation particles, ma and mi. They come before the word they negate. So when we see this, then we know that me as a negation particle is going to negate the following syllable, which is tun, and that's the same word that we just saw in the title, meaning to rely. So me tun can mean don't rely, do not rely. And then what we did in the previous box, gongsak law makes sense, right? Don't rely on the individual. Okay. So this is really a condensed little saying. If it was regular prose, it would be more filled out, maybe. So it takes some commentary to understand what the meaning of it is for most people. Okay, so gong zakla mitan, don't rely on the individual. And then the last box, chu latun. Well, chu is the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, of course. So chu la, on the Dharma, tun, rely. So this is pretty straightforward. Then, gongzak la, mitun, chula tun. So you can see that the word order, of course, in Tibetan is different from English word order, right? So do not rely on the individual, whereas Tibetan actually says individual on, don't rely on the Dharma, whereas Tibetan says Dharma on, rely. Okay, so then when we go through the parsing like that, we can come up with a reading, and then it's actually a different process when we decide how to translate it, right? So it's actually a different part of the brain. Okay, but that's basically how we study Tibetan, as people coming from the English side, So again, we spell out a line, we read the line, then we parse it. We take it apart, analyze it, find out what part of speech things are, and then what's their meaning in terms of vocabulary. And then we try to put that together and see how, following the hints of the particles, um, how those words all relate to each other. And then we craft, say, a draft translation. Okay. Regarding the word tun, then at the bottom of the page here, we see Ratatata Narotona Tun. It's a class 6 verb. So there are 8 classes of verbs, and it's a class 6 verb. So first I'll talk about that a little bit. A class 6 verb means that the subject would be in the instrumental case, and the object would be in the accusative case. Now, the accusative case is one of the 3 that's marked by a la-dun particle. So we see the gongzak law. Now, because it's an imperative statement giving an order or an instruction, the word you is kind of assumed, right? If you say to someone, come in, we're basically meaning you come in, or have a seat. We're saying you there, have a seat, have a tea, have a cup of coffee, right? So the word you is understood here in Tibetan just like as it would be in English. So that's what the class 6 refers to. So that's we can go into the 8 classes of verbs on another occasion. And then further on, after the class 6, we say that it's a 2-form verbs. It's a 2-form verb. So then we can refer to these 4 boxes down below. Unlike some languages where there's over 100 different forms and spellings of a single verb, Tibetan can only have 4 as a maximum. And Tibetan is divided into 2 moods. And the first mood is called the indicative, and it just indicates fact or action, either in the present, the past, or the future. So those are tenses, right? Present tense, past tense, future tense. And so we have those listed. And then there's another mood, which is the imperative, which either gives an order in Tibetan or expresses a wish, like the optative in some languages. So a verb can only be spelled 4 different ways in Tibetan. Compare that with just about any other language. It's pretty simple in terms of numbers of forms. So that's what that refers to when it's a 2-form. We can see the spelling of the present is ratatata naro to na tun. And then that same spelling is the spelling of the imperative, ratatata naro to na tun. But both the past and the future have a ba prefix. This is common. So ba'o ratatata na ten in the past, and then the same thing, ba'o ratatata na ten in the future. So that's what we call it, a 2-form verb. Tun, ten, ten, tun. 2 tuns and 2 tens. So there's just 2 forms. And then the meaning is to rely on, to depend on, to place confidence in, or to trust. And so here, that's tun as a verb. So at the Tibetan Language Institute, we teach 10-week long courses. And in the first 10 weeks, we learn to read the script and some basic vocabulary. And then the second 10 weeks, we learn a little bit about the grammar and syntax of the language. And then that's continued in the 3rd week. And so as we teach those classes, and there are different handouts too. And if you're someone that has been in a class 2, a level 2 or level 3 class, a level 3 class has a set of handouts, and one of them is on the 8 classes of verbs. And it's very common that a syllable in Tibetan can be a noun, an adjective, or a verb with the same spelling. Okay, so I think that's enough on that now. So then there's our line 1. Gongzak la mitun chulatun. Don't rely on the individual, rely on the Dharma. The individual who happens to be teaching the Dharma, right? Rely on the Dharma. So that's why we put in that spiritual teacher in the first box there. Okay, that's line 1. Let's look at line 2. Now, line 2 of the Four Reliances, same thing. We have the line of text at the top, the parsing box, a translation, and then some notes at the bottom. This is be the same note because this word tun is repeated over and over again in the Four Reliances. More than 4 times, actually, you'll see. Okay, so now we spell line 2. Sa, gigu tsi, ga, tsig, la, ma, gigumi, ra, tatata, naroto, na, tun, da, narodo, na, dun, la, ra, tatata, naroto, na, tun. That's the spelling. Now I read it out loud. It's very good to do this yourself, to spell out loud and to read out loud. So the reading, Sik, La, Mi, Tun, Dun, La, Tun. Sik, La, Mi, Tun, Dun, La, Tun. Okay, let's look at the parsing of that. So we've got Sik and La in one box. So Sik is a noun. We can drop down and see that it means word. And then it's got another La Dun particle from the Divine Tree Grammar Poem, verses 20 to 26. And that particle can be the one that means regarding. And here we get a little more specific and make it on, but regarding words, or the word, okay. And then the next box is Mitan, don't rely again, Maki Gumi negation particle from the Divine Tree Grammar Poem, verses 73 to 75. And then the verb tun again, Mitan. So Sikla Mitan. You see how it's following the pattern of line 1. Instead of don't rely on the individual, now we're saying word on don't rely. Don't rely on the words. Don't be a literalist, right? And then dunlaten, dun means meaning or benefit, can mean topic and many other things, fact sometimes, but laten. So law on, dun, the meaning, on the meaning, turn, rely on the meaning. So this one, sikla mitan, dunlaten, don't rely on the word or words of a particular teaching, rely on the meaning. So don't rely on the words, rely on the meaning. Yeah. And then there's tun, it's exactly the same because the verb that we have again in rely is a verb. So we put that so you can consult that again. Okay, so that's line 2. Sikla mitun, dunla tun. Don't rely on the words, rely on the meaning. This is now line 3. This little teaching is written in such a way that it actually can be memorized. So after we analyze it like this, and we have a pretty good understanding of each syllable, and then we understand how they all fit together, and then we can rely on the translation here if we want. And then we can spell it and read it, a line, but then we can recite the line like many times, like 21 times or 108 times. And then you'll see that you have it memorized, and then memorize with the understanding of the meaning like that. And that's something that can stay with you. And this is something that's taught very, very frequently by Tibetan lamas of all different lineages. Okay. Line 3, then continuing. Daratadrana drong, da naro do na dun, la, magi gumi, ratatata naro to na tun, na dringbu ne sa ne, da naro do na dun, la, ratatata naro to na tun. That was the spelling, now the reading. Drong dun la, mi tun, ne dun la tun. So we've got don't rely on this, rely on that, now for the third time. So with that repetition, that makes it easier to memorize, to remember. So that's a skillful way to teach, I think, to have repetition like that. So we're repeating the don't rely on X, rely on Y instead formula, and go see that, go through all 4 lines. So here we were just told to not rely on the individual, but rely on the meaning. And now there are different kinds of meaning. Okay. So the first box, Drong Dun La. So Drong we see identified as an adjective, and then and it means straightforward, or like kind of like pedestrian, like ordinary, straightforward meaning. Um, okay. And then there's dun, that's the meaning. So Drong is straightforward or ordinary, almost like surface. And then dun is meaning. And so the Drong dun then, um, so regarding with the law meaning the regarding, right, or on. So regarding the Drongden, the straightforward meaning or meaning on the surface or face of the face value meaning, something like that, right? And you could say literal meaning. Okay, so regarding the literal meaning, Meeten in the box in the middle, again, don't rely. Oh, don't rely. So we're just told to rely on the meaning, but now each line we're becoming a little more subtle in the teaching, right? Each of the 4 lines. So the Drongden, regarding the straightforward meaning, Miten, don't rely on that. Don't rely on the straightforward meaning or the apparent meaning. Okay. And then the last box then, Naden Latin. So ne is an adjective, and it means definitive or actual or real or authentic, something like that. And then dun, meaning. So the authentic meaning or the definitive meaning, Latin, on that turn rely. So rely on the definitive meaning. So we have don't rely on the apparent meaning, rely on the definitive meaning. Now this is a basis of a tremendous amount of teachings, again, in all 4 schools and many different texts, and then teachings too. This is very frequently taught. So when we just read it, there's kind of a basic, general, kind of almost like intro to Buddhism meaning. But then as we go on, we see that there's a little bit deeper meaning, and it's that one which we should rely on. So then some people know these Sanskrit words, the Drongdan in Sanskrit down at the bottom of box 1, you can see there it's the Nayarta, the Drongdan. And then the Nadan in Tibetan, the definitive meaning is Nitarta, Nitarta. So 2 different Sanskrit words, but in Tibetan they're Drongdan and Nadan. Okay, so don't rely on the Drongdan, rely on the Nadan. Okay, that's line 3. Let's go on to line 4. So line 4. So we just keep doing this throughout this whole prayer, the spelling, the reading, the analyzing, the translating, and you just repeat that over and over and over again. You're slowly turning into a reader of Tibetan. And it's really a great deal of fun to pick up a practice text, for instance, or something like the Heart Sutra, and see that you can actually read it and come to understand it. And so this is one of the things that I think we want to do, thousands of lines like this as we train and as we practice, if we can find in grammar books. And then also at TLI, we have a series of readers, like we've just come out with a reader based on the Heart Sutra. So the Heart Sutra, then when we study it, it's laid out like this with parsing tables in the book. And then it has just the Tibetan text and then its translation as well. So you can go through this process with something like the Heart Sutra, for instance. And so there's 77 lines in the Heart Sutra. It's colophon, and then it's often taught with some repelling verses that go with it. But we do this, we have a translation workbook, we call it, and you can work your way through this same process using the Heart Sutra, or Tsongkhapa's Three Principal Aspects of the Path, or the 8 Verses of Mind Training, and then a whole series of Tibetan prayers in our reader. They're all laid out like this. So you want to just keep doing this process. If you want to learn to read Tibetan, you just keep doing it over and over again and looking at the analysis in the parsing table, looking at the translation, maybe offering your own translation. And then the books all have an ample place for taking notes as well. Maybe you want to write in your teacher's comments or translation on the lines of the text. So this is the way to take involvement with the Buddhist teachings to a whole other level, kind of, the old training wheels up to riding a motorcycle, maybe. Okay, so line 4. Ranatanamanam. And then one other thing I'll say, the vocab that we're seeing right here in this simple little 4-line teaching, this is all quintessential Tibetan Buddhist vocabulary. So it's vocabulary that you want to know and that you will see recurring hundreds and thousands of times as you go on in your life, looking at Tibetan, learning Tibetan, and reading Tibetan. So it's a core teaching, really important teaching, and then it's conveyed via the vehicle of very important vocabulary. And then the grammar points that we're making here, for instance, I didn't mention it, but the Latin particles come after the word they modify. These negation particles we have here come before the word they modify. Verbs come at the end. This is all standard things that we see in regards to what Tibetan texts we're looking at, whether sadhana prayers, teachings, or texts like the Heart Sutra. The 37 practices of the Bodhisattva or Shantideva are 2 great things to look at in Tibetan, very inspiring. So this is how Tibetan works, the nuts and bolts, you could say, how Tibetan is put together and how it works. This is how the teachings are conveyed. This is some of the quintessential vocabulary, it's the quintessential grammar, and put in a way that this is how Tibetan works, the standard way. So you're learning the way as well as the items, like the actual particles and the vocabulary of the words, and then the way they work together comes about by doing what we're doing here today. Okay, line 4 then, to spell it first of all. Ranatanamanam Shadrengu She Sa She La Magigumi Ratatata Naroto Natun Yadrengu Ye Shadrengu She Sa She La Ratatata Naroto Natun. Now to read it. Nam She La Mi Tun Ye She La Tun. All right. Nam She La Mi Tun Ye She La Tun. Let's look at that in the parsing boxes. So Namshe is a word that we learn, I think, in level 1 or level 2 book, but Namshe is consciousness. It's a very interesting word to look at. Its etymology. So when we look at the etymology of Tibetan, it's extremely informative, and the Dharma resides within the etymology of the Tibetan words. And then the Tibetan words are put together in relation with each other. So we study the grammar to learn about the relation of the words, but we study the individual vocabulary items to learn about the concepts. And then the 2 work together to make further concepts, right? But namshe is a very interesting word. Nam is a particle, basically, that means part or aspect. It can mean the kind of something, not a nice person, not kind in that way, but kind in the sense of sort, type. So nam, part or aspect, and then she is the syllable that means know, K-N-O-W, know, to know. So namshe is knowledge and aspects. So it's like aspectual knowledge, it's partial, incomplete knowledge. So for instance, we know from Western science, the wonderful miracle of vision, we know a tremendous amount about the human eye and seeing, but then how that actually works in terms of bringing, like I'm looking out the window and I see a tree, how does that happen that I'm over here and with my brain inside my head, and the tree's out there, but then I cognize that, that becomes apparent to my consciousness. That's pretty mysterious. So we know some things, we know a bunch of things, but it's not a complete picture of human knowledge. So Namshe Latin, no, excuse me, Namshe law regarding consciousness, and then Mita again, don't rely not. So rely not on consciousness. Don't rely on consciousness. So we can rely on it in a relative way, obviously, right? That's how we live in the world. But ultimately, when we're talking about liberation, realization, enlightenment, and the ultimate nature of things, we can't rely on that consciousness, that kind of consciousness, because it's incomplete. It's nam or namshe. Okay, so then in contrast, instead, then we have box 3, yeshe laten. So yeshe is also a fun word to look at in terms of its etymology. Ye, all by itself, Yadringpo Ye means primordial, transcendent, beyond duality, beyond subject and object. Namshe has to do with subject and object duality, right? There's me here and the tree there, so I'm conscious of the tree. And if I knock on the wall or knock on the desk, I can feel that, right? So I'm conscious of that like that. Now we're talking about something else. Ye is primordial and She is knowing again. So rely on primordial knowing. So sometimes we translate this wisdom, but then there's at least 3 words that are commonly translated into English as wisdom. Which one do you mean? That's why we study Tibetan. Then we can look at the Tibetan and see which one the author means. And he means, Yeshe, primordial knowing. And so often translated as wisdom or primordial wisdom. And then also, I like Greek words. So I think gnosis, the Greek word for wisdom, is a very good solution too, a very good choice in translating. Some people will talk about, their neighbor is really a wise old lady, because maybe she knows how to garden well or whatever. But that's a different use of the word wise than we're talking about here. So when we say gnosis, that gives the connotation of something uh, profound, something more to it than just ordinary worldly wisdom. That's even an expression in English, right? Worldly wisdom. Okay, so don't rely on consciousness, rely on primordial wisdom. Ooh. Okay, so there you know that there's 6 perfections, and the 6th one is She Rob, with the She and Rob, so a superior kind of knowing. But then when we speak of the Bodhisattvas, there are 10 perfections that they practice. And the 10th one, the pinnacle of them all, is Yeshe. So that's what we should rely on. Okay, so that's line 4. So now we can look at the whole little teaching altogether, the Tunpa Ji, the 4 reliances. So I'll just read them out one by one and then read the English translation. And I have a feeling that all translations are, not definitive. They're just a good shot at it, maybe, a better or worse shot at it. But they give us a general idea of what it means. And then to really get into what it means, you want to do what we just did, right? Spell it out, read it out, parse it, analyze it, reflect and meditate on it, maybe. Okay, so the Tunpa Ji, the 4 reliances. Gongsak, La, Mitun, Chulatun. Don't rely on the individual, rely on the Dharma. That line 1 again in Tibetan. Gongzak La, Miten, Chulatan. Then line 2, don't rely on the words, rely on the meaning. Sikla, Miten, Dunlatan. Sikla Miten, Dunlatan. Don't rely on the words, rely on the meaning. So that's a deeper teaching, right? We're going deeper into our exploration of truth, you could say. And then number 3, don't rely on the apparent meaning, rely on the definitive meaning. Drangden La, Miten, Naden Laten. Drangla Miten, Naden Laten. And then number 4, don't rely on consciousness, rely on primordial wisdom. Namshe La, Miten, Yeshe Laten. Namshe La, Miten, Yeshe Laten. Okay, now I'll read the whole thing in Tibetan without commenting. Tunpaji, Gongsak La Miten, Chulaten. Sikla Miten, Dunlaten. Drongdun La Miten, Naden Laten. Namshe La Miten, Yeshe Laten. Okay, there you go. So I'd like to invite you at the end here to explore our website. And so we have the YouTube channel that you found, and then the website. We also have a Facebook presence. And then for further information, there's the address to the website, which you can email info@tibetanlanguage.org for more info. So as it says up above there, what we do is we teach Dharma Tibetan for Dharma students. You could say serious Dharma students that want to go farther into it. And then we try to make both our teachings, the way, the manner in which we teach, and the materials that we create student-friendly and accessible, rather than esoteric and difficult. And then we teach a series of 10-week Zoom courses 3 times a year. And then frequently, we have one coming up, frequently I teach a 1.5-hour introduction to Tibetan. So this is a very good thing to review if you're just beginning or if you've not yet begun. A very good way to get started. So I talk a little bit about the coming of Buddhism to Tibet and its relation to the language and the development of the classical Buddhist Tibetan language in comparison with just the colloquial language and things such as that. And then I actually teach the alphabet in those 3 intro lectures. And there's a tremendous amount of study aids both on the YouTube channel and on our website. Many pages and pages of free and interesting things you can find there. So thanks for tuning into this, and I hope to see you again soon. And we do some more studying of the language of the Lamas, Classical Tibetan. Thanks very much.